Hello, everybody. A very good morning. Welcome to this webinar from Razorpay on disruptive and cost-effective marketing growth hacks for small and medium businesses. A topic that is very relevant to our current context, our current situation, the current state of our economy because of COVID, with a lot of cash-strapped businesses. My name is Vedanarayanan. I take care of the SMB business practice at Razorpay. Razorpay, I'm sure most of you would have heard the name. It happens to be one of India's top fintech brands and companies, better known for its receivable suite of solutions, which allow businesses to be able to receive funds. Over the last couple of years, we have metamorphosed to also offer solutions which allow businesses to be able to pay out funds, and we also offer working capital lines of credit. We've become an end-to-end money movement player. I have with me Ankit and Nikhil. Thank you so much, Ankit and Nikhil, for joining us here in this webinar. And Ankit heads the business development practice at Affle, which happens to be a mobile marketing platform. And he helps startups and digital enterprises to be able to grow their business and acquire and accelerate their customer acquisition through cost-effective means via the digital medium. Welcome once again, Ankit. We're very pleased to have you here on the panel. We have here Nikhil Arora, a person that I personally admire. I'm a big follower of a lot of his fitness mantras that he puts out on LinkedIn. He happens to be the managing director and the head of the GoDaddy India business. He's previously played a lot of leadership roles, both at WeWork and at Intuit. Welcome once again, Nikhil. Very honored to have you here. Very pleased to have you here on this webinar. Let's dive straight in. The topic of the hour is disruptive and cost-effective growth hacks for SMBs. And I mean, given the state of the hour, the state of the year, the state of the century, we are living in never before seen times, right? And we have to talk about the Tyrannosaurus Rex in the room, right? It's not just an elephant in the room; it's a T-Rex in the room, which essentially is COVID. A five-letter word starting with C, ending with D, essentially, which is COVID. I think each of us have our own respective vantage points from where we have built our own perspectives. I think each of us should certainly talk about what have been some of the key ecosystem observations that we have seen because of COVID. I think that would be a good place for us to start. Nikhil, do you want to go first? Maybe talk about from your vantage point at GoDaddy, what have been some of the trends that you've been observing?
Yes, thanks, Shweta, and thanks, Ankit. Great to be here with both of you and the panelist and the participant. I think as we kind of all are processing the entire uncertainty which is surrounding us and been surrounding us for the last, I would say 2.5 months, right? The first thing is kind of starting from how it's impacting us as humans, right? And then I'll get into business. And when I say humans, I'm getting into employees, because for every company, small, big, or large, it's all impacting the way we operate. As peers, as colleagues, as vendors, as suppliers, right? So I think that whole thing has gotten disruptive, and the whole, I would say, collaboration and productivity element, that all has challenged us, right? So I think that's clearly one theme which has really, affected us. From a customer's point of view, clearly, I think, we've seen a lot of, I would say, people gone on a pause mode, because the uncertainty is both from a cash flow perspective, from a business certainty perspective. Customers are kind of waiting and watching as to say, what would be the new normal? We all know there's a new normal, but what that new normal looks like, I think, every day and every week, those things change depending on, the type of lockdown and what's happening in each city. I think thirdly, it's also, I would say, flatten the leadership curve. We talk about flattening the curve, but I feel like this is a time where, whether you're an 18-year-old or a 60-year-old, I think the leadership attributes have actually gotten flattened, because we all kind of almost like call it like a fresh graduates out here trying to figure out, what is really, what are the leadership attributes to have us successful. And I think it's given us an opportunity to both to an 18-year-old or a 60-year-old to actually come up with their own set of perceptions and experiences and actually, help the situation, right? And the fourth one I would say would be, I think, the relevance of public-private partnership. I don't think ever in the history of the business we've seen the reliance of public on private and private on public, right? Because how a city is getting mobilized, which supply chain is opening, which with healthcare systems are helping, the private sector. the interaction, the cooperations, the dependency of public-private partnership has certainly taken a new meaning, both for survival and for businesses to actually operate and so on, right? And the last one is, I think, just the digitization curve, right, which was moving at a pace has certainly accelerated by, I would say, 4 or 5 years, right? Whether you look at industries, both digital and non-digital, I think that curve's really changed a lot. So I think, just kind of summarizing, I think obviously as humans, we have been impacted, right? Customer behavior is significantly impacted. I think the public-private partnership, I think the kind of the business uncertainty is very high. And then I think just as leadership attributes, we've all been challenged to define what new leadership is.
Yep. Thanks for that, Nikhil. Very interesting. And a quick call out to all of the people who have dialed in, to the entire audience universe out there who's watching us live. Guys, whatever questions you have, please do put it out in the Q&A section. The panel will get to it at the end of the entire conversation, which will be in say 30 minutes from now. So please do keep the questions coming in. Yeah. Over to you, Ankit. From your vantage point as the leader of the business development practice at Apple, if you could give us a quick overview of the ecosystem.
Yeah. So again, I think as rightly said by Nikhil, right, this is like a Black Swan event and it's affecting individuals, consumers or businesses, society at large, right? Imagine a simple handshake when we do will now not be so common, right? We'll do namaste as we saw Prince Charles doing it. Or for example, the Japanese bow, ojigi, or a Vulcan salute, if any of you guys are Star Trek fans. So it is definitely going to change a lot of economies and way business has been done. And in the new normal also, and again, mind you, not all these transformations are bad, right? Like we've seen examples of how, for example, the pollution level was so low in Delhi last couple of weeks back when we were in lockdown completely. Or for example, personal hygiene, right? What Swachh Bharat was trying to achieve, and it took almost 7 years.
I think there's some problem with Ankit's internet. His image seems to have frozen, or he got very excited on what he was saying.
It could be electricity issue also.
Yeah, it could be electricity issues. I'm sure Ankit will join us very soon. Let me quickly give you a sense of what we have been observing at Razorpay. And at Razorpay, we've been lucky enough, we're blessed enough to have a vantage point wherein we have a ringside perspective of what's happening in the SMB and startup ecosystem in India. And we'd like to think of us as an index fund that sits on top of the entire SMB and startup ecosystem in the country. And what we have observed is that while the month of March was obviously a tough month for the entire country and for the SMB and the entrepreneurial ecosystem in India, the months of April and especially May have been particularly encouraging. We've seen a lot of very strong lead indicators that have actually started coming through. Both in the month of April and in the month of May, we've seen some record high number of new business acquisition, right? First time new businesses which have come onto the Razorpay platform and have started receiving funds. And the even more encouraging aspect in all of this is that these are not new businesses that have come on board from the competition. The majority of the new businesses that come on board and start using Razorpay are essentially first time users of digital payment needs, which is a great sign for the entire ecosystem and for the startup and the SMB ecosystem in India, because it essentially shows that they are now ready to actually embrace digital payments. The other thing which is also interesting is the fact that a lot of the new businesses that are coming in also seem to have strong fundamentals. They seem to have strong business fundamentals because the new freshly acquired merchants who are coming on board, the kind of gross merchandising value, the GMV value that they actually pull through Razorpay is at a record high as well. So we're not just acquiring record high numbers in terms of volumes, we're also acquiring these new volumes of merchants coming in, or also even at a unit level, contributing record high or receiving record high payments from their end customers, which is a great sign, which essentially validates that a lot of these businesses have strong fundamentals, as I said, and have achieved very strong PMF. The other very interesting sign that we have observed, especially in the last couple of months, is the fact that the kind of adoption and growth that we have seen for digital payments from businesses which are in tier 3, 4, and 5 and below has accelerated. right? We're seeing more and more businesses which are from some of the rural hinterlands of the country. They are actually coming on board. And I remember Nikhil actually talking about this in an interview on television once, wherein he said that more than 50% of GoDaddy's fresh acquisitions actually come from tier 2, tier 3 and below. So this certainly attests to that fact as well. That was from a domain name registration perspective. Here, this is more from a digital payment acceptance perspective, which is one further step down in the entire digital evolution life cycle. So I think all of these signs, I mean, it's been a tough last couple of months, but I do see all of these signs essentially point to very strong lead indicators, which paint a very rosy picture for the SMB and startup ecosystem as we crystal ball gaze towards the rest of the year.
Sorry, no. So let me add a little bit of more color to what you were saying.
Sure.
Like the way where we work at Affle, right? We look at a lot of app economies because at the end of the day, a lot of businesses in the real world are now becoming an app on the phone. And what we've seen is like what I call the EFGH category, which is doing very well. When I say E, it is largely entertainment, whether it is OTT apps, which you are consuming now because you're not going out in theaters and watching movies, or it is your education tech, right? Like today itself, there was a news that one of the edtech companies now becoming a unicorn and vying for that. So a lot of people who were first going to schools are now consuming that content online. So education tech has really taken off, the likes of companies like Unacademy, Vedantu, and several more which have come out there. Then you also have e-commerce, right? So a lot of segment was still e-commerce was all like a top 50, 80 million people, maybe still very young now. A lot of like older people, like I can personally vouch, for example, my parents who were very always shy to order something online. Now, I'm sure all of us have these stories that they started ordering online. So especially in the E category, edtech, education, as well as e-commerce is doing well. Now, in the F category, what I'm talking about, it is largely fintech, right? So this, as you rightly said, digital payment has really taken out well. So here we have the example of that. The G is largely gaming. So what is also interesting is that today gaming has become a way for social entertainment. And I'm sure divided by borders, we are getting united by games like Ludo and poker and Rummy. And we see a massive surge of these game plays because we track those very closely and they're doing very well. So gaming, for example, has done very well. And lastly, also health tech, because a lot of time these high touch businesses, which I call, right, you have to go to a doctor, they will test you, all that because of the fear of the contact are now trying to move online. So whether it is doctor consultation, whether it is telemedicine, will all really take off from this. So again, COVID has created this whole interesting cauldron where these EFGH categories, as I mentioned, are doing very, very well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and thanks for bringing those points, Ankit. At Razorpay, again, while I mentioned that at an overall level, our new business acquisition is at an all-time high. E-commerce did see a minor blip during the months of March and April, but that was more than made up for by some of these categories that you said. An upsurge from all of these categories: edtech, health tech, gaming, to a certain extent NGOs as well. I think a lot of these categories have more than stepped up and made up for that shortfall. In the month of May, of course, everybody is on the upsurge. The other question for us to consider, as we move on, is in this day and age, right? We live in as I said earlier, we live in epoch-making times, right? Never before seen times. What do you think need to be, and marketing dollars and capital is king, right? Cash is king, marketing dollars are hard to come by. Given all of this, what do you think would need to be some of the key differences in growth strategies and marketing strategies, both from an acquisition and engagement perspective, that SMBs and startups need to look at? Nikhil, you want to quickly take that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, the first thing I would talk about is really, I would say retention is more important right now than ever. As all of us know, right, it costs double to acquire a new customer and have to maintain the same one. So I think focusing on retaining and helping the current customers should be kind of the first kind of call to action for businesses. So for example, like for GoDaddy, first thing we did was we stood up a page called Open We Stand. And it's a microsite for all small businesses, because there's some things we can create and some things you can curate. And so what page was a one page, it's one-stop shop where all the resources are available for small businesses, both ours and others, right? So if you're looking for any information on what avenues banks are providing, or what avenues government is providing or what avenues GoDaddy is providing, that becomes kind of your microsite. So create some sort of I would say, a strategy and then an initiative which is engaging your customers and helping your customers at current time, right? So I think customer retention, creating, curating, using your front of site, using your, whatever kind of opportunities you have of real estate to do that. Secondly, I think in terms of acquiring new customers, obviously, as both of you talked about, right, there's a huge interest in coming online. Like we're seeing the same trend as you guys are mentioning in month of May, especially from tier 2, tier 3 towns where people want to make a presence online. So come up, if you don't have a product which is, I would say a basic product for people to come online today, or in your category, if you're not online, whatever the category is, try to be price sensitive because that's important. Today, cash is tight. So like, for example, we created a product called Online Startup Bundle, which is like one-page website for like 500 rupees, right? So we want the people who are coming new to this digital world to not to be overwhelmed by price and technology both. So create, some sort of a very basic, cheap, but value prop product for them. Third is using the influencer channel, right? I think, which is really your partners, right? Your supply, people who are out in the remote parts of whether tier 2, tier 3, where you're seeing the opportunity. Because in today's world, the old marketing strategies of probably like, if you were doing more, I would say, fixed marketing things like TV, like, kind of out of home or other ones, right? Or radio or whatever, right? Those things are very hard to kind of, both they're expensive and they're not nimble, right? You cannot change it. So obviously digital and kind of doing all the possible, leveraging all the digital channels is important, but also leveraging your partner channel is very important, because the word of mouth has probably been not as important as any other time in history, because you're going by trust and you're going by references and so on, right?
Nikhil, I just wanted to double click on that point that you were making about influencers. And so I used to previously lead marketing for one of India's leading edtech brands. And there again, we had, for each of our different courses that we used to offer, we used to have people whom we called as course advisors. Right? These were essentially global thought leaders with a lot of social media capital who came on board as course advisors, who essentially lent that stamp of credibility for that course. So be it a data science course or a digital marketing course, a project management course, etc. So this, to a certain extent, it did help with acquisition, but the primary play there was to improve conversion rates and credibility for the brand and for the content itself. And in a lot of these cases, the reasons, the incentivization models that we had to get these thought leaders to work with us was part commercial and part, there was some kind of a barter exchange as well, wherein we also promised to promote and propagate their personal brand. What has worked in your experience?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Like for us, the channel of web designers or web developers, right? What we call our pro channel, right? If you are a customer today in the world who wants to come online, likely you'll go to a web designer or web developer because that's your person you trust, or he's local and you can, work with him or her, right? So for us, they are both an influencer because they are the first point of contact and advice for the customer. Secondly, they're also a recommender because they will recommend to the customer, hey, buy this product from GoDaddy or buy this product from somebody else. And third, they'll likely be the service provider, and once the fulfillment is done, right? So for us, we've engaged very closely with the web designer, web developers, where we are not only helping them help our end customers, but we're helping the web designer and web developers because we have a program today which provides them with both commercial benefits, right, or co-marketing benefits, and also gives them tools and basically processes which can help them manage their clients, right? So it's more, I would say, a semi-product kind of value proposition we're giving to the influencers because they are managing all these small businesses. So I think what works is both provide them a product, program, and commercial value props so they can help serve their customers.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Nikhil. A lot of insights. Ankit, from your perspective, what do you think would be 2-3 mantras that SMBs and startups need to follow in this day and age, which can help them grow scalably, which can help them acquire and engage their customers in a scalable, cost-effective fashion?
Correct. So I think 2 points here, Veda. One largely what I think Nikhil also mentioned, that COVID has created a whole distrust economy, right? There's a lot of fear, and you really need to build a lot of demonstrable hygiene standards, for example, if you want to get people back into restaurants or in malls, etc. Similarly, you need to build that trust with your customers, both existing as well as potential. Now, one obviously easy way to build trust is you give them price waivers and discounts, etc. But I think the more difficult but long-term sustainable is trying to build trust through engagement. Now, for example, if you're in a B2B setup, how do you build that engagement? You build engagement through case studies, through how-to videos, how to use the product video, how to like testimonials. These webinars like these are actually a very good way to build engagement with your customers, which hopefully when things become much smoother, sticks with you, and that helps you to grow the whole business and build that engagement because you are the top of mind. Because when the times were tough, you stood by them through not just price waivers, but a lot of education and evangelism, so that
I think we've lost Ankit again. Could be some power issues, internet issues at his end.
One thing I wanted to add on while Ankit comes back is, I think webinars and customer engagement is very critical, but I think also important to do in a very personalized way. You know, as we know today, there's like webinars overload. I mean, not to bring down webinars, but there is everybody is doing the webinars for the right reason with the right intention. But you know, if for your own customers, right? So give them the personalized service, right? Whether it's a small morning chat you want to do with 10 customers, right? Or with your 20 customers in the evening, whatever, right? Make it personal, make it customized, make it relevant. So that way, you know, they also feel the love and the, you know, and the attention from you and so on, right? So for example, we try to do is, you know, like every morning we're talking to, like I do talk to 4 or 5 customers every morning. I just pick up the phone and chat up with them, or sometime at midnight, because the ones who are working midnight shift serving clients abroad. And that information, both for them and for me, is extremely valuable and gives them that, you know, I would say a white glove personalized feeling, because they want to not be a part of mass as customers. They want to be, you know, your own, you know, loved customers. And that's very important.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Nikhil. But here's the conundrum that a lot of early stage, you know, enterprises, smaller medium businesses face, right? They've got limited resources, they've got limited time, they've got limited money. So, and you've got to balance both of these seemingly, if not perpendicular, seemingly tangential objectives. One, which is customer engagement, and the second, which is also acquisition, fresh acquisition, right? So where do they draw the line? What is the Lakshman Rekha they need to look for? How do they balance both of these needs, right? They need to engage their existing customers, while at the same time, they also need to acquire fresh customers. Any rules of thumb that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think one simple thing which I've observed in a lot of startups is that they're extremely, focused on commercial aspects and not about customer learning that much. I mean, some are and some are not. And let me explain you, right? A lot of businesses rely on secondary research to learn about customers. Now, secondary research is the translation of a translation of a translation, right? Nikhil did a research paper and he published it. It's my interpretation, not yours. And so if you're in the business, I don't think it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of resources to actually be with, you know, in front and center of your customers, right? So we used to do, or we still do, is something called Follow Me Homes, which is like literally I'm sitting in the customer's, you know, kind of business now virtually, right? To understand, you know, what are the workflows happening? What are the constraints they are working on? What are the resources they have? Because I can design the best product in the world. I don't understand, they are having people from tier 2, tier 3 towns who are not well educated to understand the technology I am trying to sell them. Or, you know, or they're working in like a very small 100 square foot office and I'm trying to sell them something which is talking about, you know, like a 2000 square foot kind of office collaborative tool. So I think the first thing is really fall in love with the customer's problem, not your own solution, which is the best thing, because the problem may be changing now. And if you're not close to your problem, you may be solving for something which is an outdated problem, right? So I think that to me is like the first denominator of business success, you know, any startup can follow. Ankit is back. Sorry, Ankit, you
Ankit, you want to finish what you were saying earlier?
Yes. So I'm talking about retention is the new growth, right? Like today, that's what the whole scenario is. And I think in that time, and this is true for a lot of businesses, especially in the B2C or even B2B, that for a really long time, we've been investing in the third-party sources, whether it is Google and Facebook. And we spend a lot of money, etc., for both acquisition and running some campaigns. But I think in this whole scenario, what we've really missed is investing in our own first-party data. And when I say first-party data, it is largely your own media This is your website. This is your social media channels where you can post reels. This is your app, for example, if you have an app, etc. And all this while all these like places of assets were all disparate islands. They would all be lying here and there, but there's no omnichannel view of say the customer across these channels. You would work like you will do a push notification on a website, then you will maybe run a campaign on Facebook, then you will try to do some Google ad advertising, and all this were very disparate. I think what is also important during this time is look at an omni-channel approach where you combine all the first party your own media channels, which are free by the way, so you don't have to pay for them. Only when you're not able to acquire or for example retain customers or do your full marketing, and there are multiple tools available, right? There's email, there is SMS. Now WhatsApp, for example, is opening up in India for businesses where you can start using it as an engagement tool. And only when you really have exhausted that is when you move to the Facebooks of the world or example display media. So I think what is going to happen is that people start taking all these channels of engagement much more seriously and in one view, in order to avoid any spillage which has been happening all this while. So I think that is very, very important. I see that change already happening where a lot of D2C brands, for example, where we work with them, are saying that how can I integrate all my paid media, social media, as well as own media channels under one platform so that I get efficiencies. And only when I'm not able to convert a user on free media, which is own channels, is when I move to paid media. So this is a very interesting point we are seeing retention. Now, in terms of when to do retention, should it be early, should it be late? I think it all depends on your evolution. If you're in your early of your evolution journey, obviously you need to get more consumers. So you'll focus.
A little unstable. So I just wanted to double click and focus a little bit on the point that Ankit was talking about, which was on owned and paid media, a point that I'm particularly passionate about, right? So owned media essentially talks about all of the exposure that you're able to drive towards your brand from your own media properties, right? Your own website, your own Facebook page, your own Twitter handle following. Paid media refers to the kind of exposure you can get for yourself by spending money. So if you've got a Facebook page with 100 followers, the owned media is the exposure you get when you post something on Facebook and all of those 100 people see it. That 100 is your owned media. For simplicity's sake and for the purpose of this example, let's assume that all of your Facebook followers actually end up seeing all of your organic content, which is not always the case because Facebook obviously wants to push users towards spending money. Let's say that a brand decides to spend money, spend $1,000 and it gets incremental exposure to say, for simplicity's sake, 1,000 more people. The 1,000 incremental exposure that the brand gets, which is outside of their page followers, organic followers, is the paid media. Now, in my view, and that's exactly what Ankit was talking about, he was talking about owned media, which is the initial 100 followers who are actually your Facebook page followers, the paid media, which comes from you actually spending money. But in my view, a lot of businesses in India focus solely just on these two aspects of media creation, but do not focus on a third aspect of media creation, which to me is an extremely cost-effective marketing growth hack, especially in this day and age, which essentially is what is popularly referred to as earned media. Right? How can you, through the strength of your brand, strength of your value proposition, strength of your content that you put out on social media, how can you create earned media for yourself? Right? There are multiple ways now, through which earned media can be created. Let me give you a quick example. Going back to the same Facebook example, let's say that you put out a Facebook post, which is visible for your 100 people, which is say an infographic, which talks about the trends in your industry, or it's a very, very interesting customer testimonial video, for example, which your followers love so much that they end up sharing in their respective feeds. Let's say 30 of your 100 followers actually end up sharing it in their respective feeds. And let's say each of them again have 100 followers each. So you have created, without spending $1 in marketing, incremental exposure of 430 multiplied by 100, which is 3,000 eyeballs, which essentially is earned media purely because you have earned it through the strength of your content. Now that is a very cost-effective growth hack. In my view, a lot of brands in India do not do enough justice to this third, very important form of media creation and brand exposure creation, which is earned media. Ankit, are you back? You want to finish what you were saying?
No, I think you covered it well. So yeah, rather than focusing on just paid media, also there are channels of owned media and earned media, which could really help you drive a lot of organic, which is much better than paid media.
Yeah, I do want to challenge you back a bit, if I may, right? I think I agree with the earned and owned media. I don't agree with your Facebook example, and let you tell me why, right? There is, and actually what Ankit made a very powerful statement earlier, talking about simple, basic tools of what your on your own media could be, right? And he talked about website, he talked about apps and all that stuff. And the reason I love Facebook, I love social media, I'm on it, but remember, those are rented platforms. They're not your own platforms. So you make sure you need to have your own presence, which is essentially whether it's, whether it's your website or whether it's your own app or some sort of your own digital identity, because that's who you are. And that will never change. And that will always be secured for you. The other platforms are great, I would say, multipliers, but they're, you don't control the larger platform. You are one part of a bigger platform. So it's very important to also figure out how do you develop loyal customers, even on Facebook, right? There's always a debate on like, how many likes are you getting? Are the good likes, bad likes? How many followers do you have? They're real followers or they're just followers for the sake of following, right? So important to use that, but I would say start with the basics. To me, I'll tell you the basics, right? If you're starting a business, have your website, right? I mean, there's nothing magical about it, but it's always the most powerful tool. It will always stay. Email. People still work on, I would say, at some, not their name, gmail.com. I won't name, kind of stuff, right? If you are called, a travel company, you should be at travel.com or travel.in, right? Get your basic naming tools right. They are still very relevant. And, in today's world, apps, right? I mean, however you want to use the apps, whether you're, part of a system or you're making your own, right? Very important. You own it, you control it, you do everything. You own the customer data, you can see it, right? I mean, with the other ones, they're good ones. Certainly use them. But I would say don't over rely on them because you don't control them.
Of course, I completely agree with you, Nikhil, and it is not an either or. And you need to obviously try multiple things. You've got to make sure that your business fundamentals are strong while still making sure that you are where your consumers are. So if your consumers are on Facebook and Twitter, and you're starting off from scratch, then you need to be where your consumers are. Completely aligned with what you're saying. And it is a combination of multiple things that will essentially help you grow scalably, help you grow your business scalably. And at Razorpay, some of the other trends that we have been observing, and especially, in light of COVID, where marketing dollars are hard to come by and you're not going to be able to, keep advertising in the Facebooks of the world and the Googles of the world, for example, for powering growth. One of the great, growth hacks that we have observed and we believe is really scalable and can power the next wave of growth for us is through channel partnerships. So that is a big focus area for us as an organization, and we will double down and focus on that over the next 12 to 24 months. It was always a focus area for us even before COVID, and it continues to be a focus area for us even more so in light of the current context, because that is a scalable way for us to grow. So something that you were talking about, Nikhil, wherein you work with people in the ecosystem who can be influencers, who speak to the same consumer demography that you are speaking to. In Razorpay's context, it is small and medium businesses. So who are the people in the ecosystem who speak to SMBs, who are not competitors of Razorpay, essentially your website developers, your chartered accountants again, right, who are key influencers in the SMB business owner making a decision on which payment gateway or which neo-banking platform to choose. And we also work with a lot of large marquee brands, which also speak to the same demographic audience that we speak to. So we have a bunch of different partners, large enterprise partners and smaller medium businesses which speak to the same ecosystem of businesses. The other cost-effective growth hack, which in my view, a lot of businesses need to focus on immediately after they have acquired their initial set of early adopter customers, right? Every business, when it is growing, would have its initial set of early adopters. The first set of, say, 500 customers, right, who are their early adopters, who have trusted in them as a brand during their early stage. The idea is you need to gain that critical mass of customers and double down in customer engagement and using that base of customers to actually drive consumer referrals. So something that I have observed in multiple experiences across multiple brands is that consumer referral as a channel is the most cost-effective channel and is a channel that converts the better in terms of funnels. I think these would be some hacks that I would certainly recommend for any business. Focus on channel partnerships, focus on creating earned media, and absolutely while focusing on business fundamentals like Nikhil mentioned, also focus on consumer word of mouth and referrals. That's something which is going to be extremely important.
Just one more point, Veda, here.
Sure.
What also this has done, COVID, right? Like it has made geography as history, if I can put it that way. So whether you are selling to someone in Bangalore, Bhubaneswar, Beijing, or even Bay Area, we are doing calls like this, right? So what it really also makes SMBs to start thinking that I don't have to limit to my own catchment area. It is not my particular territory or my region, because today, whether you are selling to someone even in US, you will be doing a Zoom call like how we are doing in this world, right? And more such webinars will happen. And that's where, again, you don't have to physically go to sell into that market. You can find these channel partners who are also willing to take your technology and together partner and try to sell them, right? And for example, even we at Affle are looking now that, so again, some context, we were a public company, we went IPO last year, we were all set to go live in international markets, but COVID happened. And now we are wondering, do we go upfront, invest money, cash there? Or can we look at channel partners where we get our own technology, we marry it with the local know of that person. Anyways, I can't travel for the next 1 year. I'll have to do Zoom calls with my potential customers as well as channel partners. I do all the training and upskilling from here remotely and let them go ahead, sell on our behalf, and together we can do a revenue share kind of a deal. So I think geography is becoming history, and that will make a lot of people to start selling at multiple different markets, not just in your own catchment area.
That's a very cool punchline, Ankit. I'm going to note that down. Geography is becoming history. Thank you for that. And I think, especially in the Indian context, I think that's a great point that you mentioned. In the Indian context, I do believe that the next wave of digital growth will actually come from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 and below, both in terms of businesses and consumers that will actually end up buying from these businesses. That's something that we've already observed at Razorpay, something that I mentioned, and that progression has been accelerated in the last few months. And for going after this audience, you cannot just rely on Facebooks and Googles of the world. That's something that a lot of businesses need to realize. You need to have channel partnerships. And that is how you can actually extend your reach to the rural hinterlands, tier 3, tier 4 and below in the country. I think that is like an absolute need, a mandatory need of the hour in the quarters to come and the years to come. We're almost out of time. So I would suggest let each of us spend a quick minute. And I'm going to time both of you, Nikhil and Ankit. If each of us can spend a quick minute in talking about, let's just pick up a hypothetical situation. If all of us were just starting up today, right? If all of us were starting a company today, what problem statement would we attack? And what kind of growth avenues would we choose? Nikhil, you want to go first? A quick minute, please.
Yeah, I'll lay out the segments. Obviously digital education, we've done something with GoDaddy Academy, but I think that's a space where it's getting disrupted from old school education to, digital education. You got health tech, which is obvious, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of innovations, whether it's telemedicine and how do we provide, healthcare services which don't need in-person stuff. Third is public-private partnership. I talked about it earlier. I think there is going to be an opportunity where never ever in the history that the importance of public-private partnership together working to solve this big, many big problems will be important. And then I think supply chain and transportation, I think that whole model of how that's going to move now with, with the kind of the restrictions would be there. And then the fifth one is really around, I would say, these events and these large, we're doing this webinar, but a lot of industries are relying on large events, conferences and all that stuff, right? So that whole industry, is going to kind of come for disruption. And fitness and all is already happening. I wouldn't call that out.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikhil. Ankit.
Yeah, so I think I spoke a little bit about the trend, like the rise of fear economy, right? Today, there's a lot of distrust, and whether you want to go to a mall, you want to sit in a cab, or you want to take a flight, there's a lot of friction today. There's a lot of checks and balances. So like the solution or the answer I was been thinking and been trying to discuss with friends and even business colleagues is hygiene as a service. So I come in that background where you have software as a service, but today hygiene as a service will start becoming where there will be these independent agencies. Like think of the whole financial world where you have these CRISIL ratings or care ratings around companies. You'll start have hygiene ratings for restaurants, for example. And already, by the way, it's happening. Today, Zomato and Swiggy are giving your hygiene rating when you order food. And they were sharing with us because there are partners that already those restaurants earning, which have a higher hygiene rating, 20% more revenue than a regular restaurant. So hygiene as a service across any businesses could become a very interesting business idea. And third party agencies who are doing it for offices, malls, even for example, cab companies, restaurants can become a very interesting business.
That's very interesting, Ankit. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go next and do a real quick job of it. I used to lead marketing for one of India's leading health tech brands before this, and I have, unfortunately enough, come to the realization that India is now the diabetes capital of the world, the heart disease capital of the world, and the cancer capital of the world. But one of the unspoken truths about the country, and there is a lot of stigma associated with it, is the entire aspect of mental health. And I do believe that is a problem statement that has come of age and it needs solving. Spoken to multiple corporates which have asked for this kind of a requirement, but there is nobody at scale in India yet who's actually solving for this. So I think mental health is a space which certainly needs to be looked at. There are multiple global benchmarks. There is this company that both Nikhil and I, both of us admire, a company called Headspace, which essentially, ironically enough, Ankit and I were actually joking about this, is a mobile app that allows for meditation and mindfulness. There is this, Indian company called Gratitude, and there is this other which essentially promotes gratitude reminders every single day, and it is a journal for positive affirmations. There is this other company that is called Preg Buddy, which essentially is a community for pregnant mothers to come together. And all of these businesses have grown to fairly significant scale. Headspace globally, Gratitude, and Preg Buddy in India, despite spending exactly zero in marketing. And these have grown essentially because they've established a very strong product market fit. They've been there in the right place at the right time, and they have grown primarily through earned media creation, virality, word of mouth, community building. These have been the 4 core mantras on top of which all of these businesses have been built. With that, we come to the end of the entire discussion. Thank you so much, Ankit and Nikhil, for your time. Let's take some questions from the audience. There are some very interesting questions that have come in. The first question, and I'm going to paraphrase these questions. One of the first questions is email, I think Ankit, you spoke about geography becoming history. I think the question is, will email become history? Businesses need to start looking at, other mediums like say WhatsApp for customer engagement? Has it finally, we've been talking about it for a while. I've been hearing email, nobody's want to check emails for the last 5 years, but people still are. Do we need to start looking at this, especially now with some of the points we're making earlier, right? Tier 2, tier 3, etc. A lot of people that don't check emails, but WhatsApp is ubiquitous. Has WhatsApp finally come of age? Nikhil, Ankit, Nikhil, you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't think email will become history. Again, WhatsApp is great, but WhatsApp is, again, you are on somebody's platform. And remember, platforms can change overnight in conditions and what you do, and so I think it will be, it's going to be coexisting with these communication tools. I don't think it's going to replace, but again, as I say, email is your identity, always will be. I mean, the thing, as you said, whether it's been talked about, hey, it will get outdated 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. Yeah, how you use email, the frequency may change, the kind of email kind of communication you do may change, but it will not go away in my view. It will definitely actually coexist with app, kind of other kind of tools like WhatsApp or WeChat or whatever they may be, and help customer communication.
Sure, that's very interesting. And there's another question, I think, Ankit, that's pretty close to, both of our hearts. I think one of the questions is around Facebook lead generation campaigns, right? And a lot of people are complaining that this is a campaign that has not quite worked well for them. There is Prateek Mishra, who's actually asked this question. I think I'll tell you what my experience has been very quickly with Facebook lead campaigns. They work really well, but you've got to make sure that there is recency. So as soon as somebody fills in a lead on Facebook, there is somebody from the sales team, if your business is a sales-led business, for example, immediately picks up that lead and gives a call, right? So even if there is possibly a few hours lag, what ends up happening is that the lead quality and the call connect ratio drops drastically. So Facebook has APIs in place, Prateek, through which you can directly integrate your Facebook lead gen effort. So as soon as a lead comes in from your Facebook campaign, you can directly plug it in into your CRM system and trigger an email as well through a tool called Zapier, right? You can even use a tool which is a very cool marketing automation tool. Using such tools, you can automate this whole process so your sales team immediately knows that a lead has been generated, so they can immediately call and follow up with that lead. The other thing that I would recommend that a lot of lead gen campaigns is that there is quite often this sticky finger syndrome, as it's called, right? Where people essentially fill in the lead by mistake, because you've got so many fields which are defaulted. So they actually end up filling a lead form when they didn't actually intend to. So one of the things you can do, which goes against the principles of conversion rate, optimizing for conversion rate, is build in some artificial friction in your entire lead generation page, right? Try to make users actually enter a couple of free form fields, which will reduce your conversion rate, yes, but you will start getting more qualified leads, because the people who have taken the time to actually fill in those extra fields would actually be higher quality. Right. So these would be 2 key mantras that I would certainly encourage Prateek and a lot of other businesses which might be facing this question. Anything to add on that, Ankit?
No, I think what is important is that one has to start looking at multiple channels. Today, consumer touch points are increasing massively. Like we talked about email, we talked about Facebook. There could be, for example, chatbots now, which becoming a whole way of doing commerce, with WhatsApp commerce opening up through JioMart. So the sad part is that there are a lot of more channels which will keep coming up, and one has to start thinking more cohesively across all this. And the other key piece is personalization. I think what is also important is that when I'm a customer and I engage with you on one touch point, when I engage with you a different touch point, I expect that you have the history of my previous part, so that I don't ask you the same obvious questions which I already given details in the previous engagement. So I think going back to a single view of the customer across channels, so that you're able to learn from previous and the follow-on engagement is much better, becomes very, very important. And again, there are tools out there which can help you manage that much seamlessly. And that's what I will say one has to start engaging with.
Yeah, and Veda, just one thing to add, it's important to define your customer audience. You know, if you ask a millennial that you're in Facebook, they'll tell you your age that you're north of 40 or 45 years old. And, you know, so they are not on Facebook, right? So depending on who you're serving, you need to pick, you know, there's clearly omni-channel approach, as Ankit was saying, but also which, because, you know, the platforms are very defined nowadays by demographics of your age, you know, who's on Instagram, who's on Facebook, you know, who's on all these other channels which keep coming. So you may be wasting time if you're trying to go for millennials on Facebook because they aren't there.
Sure, absolutely, Nikhil. Couple of last questions, I think, which is more around digital payments, which have come through. One is from Irfan. I think the question is, a lot of new businesses are coming up. How do we know if they are sustainable? Irfan, I was talking about it earlier. We're seeing a lot of good cross merchandising volume being pulled through by these new businesses, which goes to show that these are not fly by night operators, or these are not businesses that are flaky. These are businesses with strong business fundamentals, right? Which is very good news. Sectors that have seen an upsurge, Nikhil was also talking about it, Ankit was talking about it, edtech, gaming, health tech, NGOs, all of these have seen a huge upsurge. I think there is another question, and I think that could be a very good place for us to, you know, wrap this entire enriching panel discussion. I think this is on, I think the Raju is actually asking us to crystal ball gaze and figure out and make some predictions on what would be some of the key digitization trends that we foresee, that we can predict, that we can prophesize over the next 2-3 years. Nikhil, you want to go first?
Yeah, and I'm assuming the spirit of the question is from a small business or generally,
absolutely,
you know, kind of stuff, right? So I think if you look at how we operate our workplaces, we will see some hybrid model emerging, right? I mean, I don't think offices will disappear, but I think the work from home will also not be 100%, maybe somewhere in the middle. I think we will still, so from a pure office work, we'll move to some hybrid, but not 100% home, because that, you know, that may not be working for many other businesses. So how we operate and will change. Secondly, I think, you know, I think we were talking about hyper local earlier, right? I do feel that there'll be local Amazons and Flipkarts of the world will emerge. And I'll tell you why. You know, today, if I'm sitting in my area of 15, 20 kilometers around my home, I need to know which medicine shop is going to deliver me something. I need to know which grocery shop is going to deliver me something. I need to know which barber shop is going to be open. I don't think I'm going to go to Amazon or Flipkart to figure that out. So I think until now, there were these global, you know, pan-country platforms. They will be there for certain kind of services, but a hyper local platforms, a neighborhood kind of stuff, I think there's going to be an opportunity there which will emerge. Third, I think there will be slowdown of globalization. There is no doubt the globalization as we know will change. In what form or structure, we don't know, but there will be a lot more reliance on, I would say, local economy and local products for local consumption. Not 100%, that doesn't mean globalization will go away. But so you know, if you're a business, that may be an opportunity to think about what are the product services which you can create here, which were, you know, being kind of imported from, you know, from abroad. And then lastly, I think, you know, we talked about kind of health, you know, the whole healthcare service and whole public-private partnership model. I think that that would certainly be very different. And as consumers and businesses, we have to invest in government relationship. No, now more than ever, because we will need them. We will rely on them, and they will need us, right? So I think investment in that part of your strategy is very important now.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. Ankit?
Yes, I think if I can encapsulate what Nikhil said, from a high touch country, we'll becoming a hybrid and a high tech country, right? So what I mean is that a lot of services were being consumed outside home, whether it was entertainment, whether it was health, where you're visiting a doctor or going to a gym, or for example, education, right? Now, a lot of hybrid models will start coming where, for example, in schools, you will have part of the courses uploaded. You go through that, and a class is more like a engagement session for question answering and bonding rather than a lecturer giving the whole lecture like that. or similarly a doctor where you have got a little bit of advice like a general practitioner, and only when you require a super specialist is when you're going to a hospital. So I think that transformation will happen where we were such a high touch country, we start becoming a hybrid of high touch and high tech, where some of these services will start happening at home because home is the safest place today.
It's very interesting. I think one of the other things, that we have been observing at Razorpay is that people are actually skipping multiple steps in terms of looking to receive digital payments, which I think will also be a key, milestone, which talks about, the future of digitization in our country. Historically, consumers used to, or merchants and businesses used to build a digital presence first. And then they used to, that the logical next point in their life cycle was then they would go and look for a digital payment option. Now what we've been observing is that a lot of our payment solutions which allow businesses to be able to skip multiple steps, cut to the chase, and directly receive digital payments, they are actually doing really well. Even in the absence of even if you don't have a Facebook page, even if you don't have a website, businesses essentially are in a hurry to be able to receive digital payments, and that I think could be the future as well. With that, I believe we are already 5 minutes over time. We've come to the end of the session. A very big thank you to both Nikhil and from Ankit for sparing an hour in your Friday morning. I know that your time is valuable. Both of you are very busy men. We really appreciate you taking time off and coming to this webinar by Razorpay. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I hope both of you did. And more importantly, I hope our audience enjoyed this webinar as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you, and I hope this was value additive. Thank you so much for your time. Uditi, Arun, please do make sure that we get all the audience questions and we respond to them. Subsequently we can certainly write back to Nikhil and Ankit with those questions which are very pointed and specific to their respective businesses. A very big thank you again to the audience and to the panelists. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.